back to the Jim Leach Show on 970 WMAY, the news and talk of Springfield. A lot of important races on the ballot 2 weeks from today, but perhaps none so important as the person who will be in charge of the office that goes after the bad guys, tries to put them behind bars, and serves as the people's representative in court. Sangamon County State's Attorney's race. We are pleased to be joined for the next hour in studio by the incumbent in that office, Republican John Milhiser, and his Democratic challenger, Ron Stradt. Both here this morning. Gentlemen, thanks again so much for being here.
Jim, thanks for having us.
And again, a reminder to our listeners, this is not a debate per se. Nobody has a stopwatch. We're not timing answers or going through that kind of a rigid format. It is a conversation among these two candidates, with me putting some questions to them to elicit information that I think will be important to voters about the issues that they'll be confronting in this office. First and foremost, though, is a chance to let our listeners become reacquainted with each of you. They've had a chance to hear a lot from you over these last few months of the campaign. But if you could just again reintroduce yourselves to them and explain to them why you are seeking this office. Let's begin with State's Attorney John Milhiser.
Well, thank you, Jim. And Jim, thanks for giving me the opportunity to come on. I'm honored to be the Sangamon County State's Attorney. I was appointed in 2010 by the Sangamon County Board. And I went to law school at the University of Illinois to be a prosecutor. I'm very fortunate to have built a career in that field. And I'm in the courtroom trying cases. I'm not originally from Sangamon County. My father was a pilot in the Air Force, so I grew up moving all around the country and overseas. Went to law school at the University of Illinois, moved to Springfield in 1997 with my wife, Springfield native, to be a prosecutor. And that's what I am doing in the courtroom daily, making sure that those who cause harm in our community are prosecuted and keeping this community safe.
Ron Stradt, tell us where you've been to this point and why you want the State's Attorney's Office to be your next destination.
Well, good morning, Jim, and thanks to all your listeners who are tuning in. I'm someone who was not born with a silver spoon in their mouth. I'm one of 6 kids. When I was born, my mother was 20. She was an Avon lady, and my father was a truck driver, and we did not have a lot of financial means. We did not talk about college in our household because we just didn't have the money to put 6 kids through college. And there were certain events that happened in my life that shaped me, and one was the Iranian hostage crisis, the Beirut bombing, and when I graduated high school, Ronald Reagan was the president, and he would say, if you want to make something of yourself, you're going to have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And so I literally did that. I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and I served for 5 years, and part of that time was spent in night school getting my bachelor's degree. And when I came back to the States, I went to the University of Illinois, and I got a master's degree in policy economics, and I went to law school, and here I am today.
I want to put the first question to State's Attorney John Milhiser, and it is simply this. What do you see as your top priority in the office? Obviously, the resources in the State's Attorney's Office can be limited. You have to allocate them in the most effective way. So what is top priority for you in allocating those limited resources?
Well, top priority is to continue to prosecute and convict those that do harm in our community. The violent offenders need to be prosecuted. They need to be locked up. And my number one priority, and I think it has to be for any state's attorney and any state's attorney's office in this state, is to make sure that our community is a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. And the public needs to have confidence in the state's attorney that they have the experience, that they have the qualifications necessary to go to court and convict those that are causing harm and doing harm in our community.
Can you quantify your success in that? Are there numbers, data, stats that you can point to say we're getting that job done?
We've continually we've been successful in prosecuting those that are causing harm. Last month, tried and convicted a drug dealer for the attempted murder of a Sangamon County deputy and a Springfield police officer. This individual brought a team of lawyers from Chicago. I personally tried that case, and he was convicted, and he will receive most likely a lengthy prison term when he's sentenced next month. And we'll continue to do that. Those that are committing violent offenses will be prosecuted, and they will be convicted, and that behavior will not be tolerated in Sangamon County.
Ron Stradt, what would your top priority be as state's attorney, and what's your assessment of how well we're achieving those objectives currently in the state's attorney's office?
Well, when you're speaking about financial resources, I think this is where my master's in policy economics comes in. I really love the discipline of economics because it really is a study of how you utilize scarce resources. And here we're talking about money, and there's not a lot of money to do everything that you want to do. But as a top priority, I think we need to make sure that our assistant state's attorneys are paid well, that the support staff are paid well, and that we have the money to keep them to stay in the job. A lot of times, assistant state's attorneys are paid so low that they'll come in and make all the contacts that they need to, and then they move on. As far as prosecutions go, this is the same sort of rhetoric that we've heard for years and years and years and years, and it's almost like the same playbook just gets passed along from appointed state's attorney to the next about prosecuting violent crime. And just in September of this year, we had 3 individuals who were out shooting up the town. They were arrested and spent 5 days in the county jail, and then they were released because it says on the release sheet, no charges to be filed by the state's attorney. Now, the problem with this is more than just twofold. I mean, there's numerous problems with this. One is one of the 3 shooters, after being out of the county jail and not being charged, committed another felony offense. The other thing is it doesn't deter crime. And when people see that their buddies are being arrested and charged with an offense and that they're going to be back out on the street, there's no deterrent effect. The other problem that we see is people in the community don't want to get involved. They don't want to call 911. They don't even want to do the Crime Stoppers, which is totally anonymous, because they see people get arrested and then they're back on the street. So speaking about resources, time is also a resource, and I think it would be highly effective for the state's attorney to build a collaborative relationship between the state's attorney, law enforcement, and community leaders to help reduce crime in our neighborhoods.
I want to come back to that point, but to the specific case that you mentioned, what should have been done in that case that wasn't done? Because we've all heard of cases that go to the state's attorney's office for whatever reason, maybe there isn't enough evidence or what have you, cases get dismissed, and it happens a lot. What didn't happen in that case that should have happened?
Well, they weren't charged. They were arrested, and they spend 5 days in the county jail. And typically when somebody gets arrested, they'll have a first appearance before a judge. In this case, a judge found probable cause to hold them. I think 5 days is a sufficient period of time to charge them.
John Milhiser, your response to that?
Well, I think it points to the importance of having a qualified, experienced prosecutor in the office who has reviewed, I myself have reviewed thousands and thousands of police reports. In this particular instance, these individuals were arrested. There was additional evidence and investigation that was done and looked for with the Illinois State Police Crime Lab, and it was determined between the police and our office that there was insufficient evidence to file charges in the case. So those individuals were released. And now, just because they're released, that doesn't mean that the investigation ends, but law requires that we not hold individuals a unreasonable amount of time before filing charges once bond is set. And it just highlights the importance of a qualified and experienced state's attorney. I want to touch briefly on what my opponent said regarding assistant state's attorneys being paid well and keeping them and training them. I have 28 attorneys that work for me, many of them hired directly out of law school. One of the important jobs of the state's attorney is to train new prosecutors. I relish that opportunity. I was on the faculty of the National District Attorneys Association New Prosecutor Boot Camp, where I taught ethics at the National Advocacy Center in Columbia, South Carolina, and I take that job very seriously and instill in my new prosecutors the importance of the office, the fact that every day they have a chance to make a positive impact on the community, and that the decisions they make affect people's lives. And I think that's very important for them to understand. And they're directly out of law school, fresh lawyers, and I try to hire individuals who want to be prosecutors, who want to do the right thing, and they do an excellent job. And the fact that it's a training ground for young attorneys to then move on to law firms and move on to make more money, I don't begrudge them for leaving, and that's fine. We or have been. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, turnover is a problem, though, that plagues public law offices in general, and it can be hard to maintain consistency when you have just a steady revolving door of attorneys coming in and out. So, what's the turnover rate currently, and are there ways to improve that?
Well, I mean, I think there are ways, and there's always going to be kind of turnover. I think there always has been in the state's attorney's office because there are jobs out there where they make more money, and there is. I don't know the percentages as far as turnover. I know I have between 5 and 7 new attorneys over the last year and a half, and that's typical to have 3 or 4 attorneys leave each year and then hire new attorneys. But again, that's the importance of having a experienced state's attorney who can train these new prosecutors into the importance of the office, how to try cases. Because that has to be the number one job of the state's attorney, to make sure those that are committing these crimes in our community are convicted, are prosecuted and convicted.
Should the county allocate more resources for attorney salaries in the state's attorney's office?
I'm always asking for more money. Could we use more money? You bet we could. But we also understand, and I understand, that we have to operate within the confines of the budget. The county is fiscally responsible, and the county board members understand the importance of the office, but also understand the fact that the money's just not there sometimes. So we're able to still deliver a high level of public service to the citizens of Sangamon County within that budget. And when I hire new prosecutors, young attorneys, I look for ones that want to be in public service, that want to prosecute cases and understand that they are giving up maybe additional money working in a bigger city or working for a law firm, but they're doing a job they love and doing a job they want to do. I went to law school to be a prosecutor. I knew when I got out I was going to make less than some of my classmates who went to the U of I, but that's what I wanted to do, and I'm looking for young prosecutors in the same mindset.
Ron Stradt, does the state's attorney's office need more resources, more money devoted to salaries or to other needs in the office?
Well, I think what the county needs to do is to go after that $2.7 million from the Populex contract. A lot of people look at the state's attorney as being the prosecutor, but there's another function, and a very important function of the state's attorney, and that's to be the legal advisor to the county board and county department heads. And several years ago, the county entered into a contract for voting machines, and those voting machines were not used because the State Board of Elections would not certify the machines. That's $2.7 million. Now, part of that was a federal grant, but still, that's our tax dollars. Why should we not get that back? When you enter into a contract for goods and services from someone and they don't perform, they don't provide the goods, they don't provide the services, you get your money back. And we have not gotten our money back, and this is going on probably 5 or 6 years now. The other thing about getting in more resources is right now there are certain mortgage companies and banks that are not paying the recording fee, and that's estimated to be about $600,000 right now. I think that we need to make the people pay the fee. If I buy my house or sell my house, I'm going to pay a recording fee. And I think the banks and mortgage companies should also be required to pay that fee, and right now they're not. And that's $600,000 that we could be bringing it back into the county.
Real quickly, I want to give the state's attorney a chance to respond to that on the recording fees.
Yeah, well, first on the Populex, which was an issue in the last election in 2008, and there was a federal grant of approximately $2.5 million to buy voting machines. The county clerk purchased these voting machines. Then they weren't certified. They couldn't use them anymore. A decision was made, a policy decision by the county clerk's office, the Sangamon County Board, and the state's attorney's office way back when, I wasn't even in the office at the time, to not go after a company that had no money. It didn't make any sense, and $2.5 million of that was a federal grant. So it's a little over $100,000 that could possibly go after. With regard to the mortgage fees, my office is working with Josh Langfelder. We have been for some time on the appropriate course of action in that case. There has been a lawsuit filed down in St. Clair County, which we are watching and following to determine the best course of action, which could be a class action suit with not only Sangamon County but other counties involved also.
And I want to pick up where we left off, sort of where we left off. We were having a conversation in the last half hour regarding cases that get dismissed, whether it's for lack of evidence, for some other reason, and I know it can be frustrating for people on the outside looking in to just say, well, why do we go through this where somebody gets arrested, the police obviously think there's reason enough to charge somebody, and then they wind up getting let go? And I want to explore that a little bit further here, and in particular talk about the use of plea bargains. And Ron Stradt, I'll put the question to you first, since you raised the issue of this one particular case. State's attorney said just insufficient evidence. There was not enough evidence to take that case to trial. But let's talk about how these cases are processed here. What would you do differently if you were state's attorney than what is being done now and making a decision as to whether to proceed with cases like this?
Well, I think the first challenge I would have as state's attorney is to try to reassure the public that when the state's attorney says that there's insufficient evidence to charge a case, that there truly is insufficient evidence. We hear that cases are not being charged for lack of sufficient evidence. We hear it so often that it makes the little boy who cried wolf credible. And I think that's a perception that we're going to have to get over quickly. Because when there truly is insufficient evidence, we want the public to know that the state's attorney's office has thoroughly investigated it and reviewed it to reassure the confidence of the public.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, though?
Sure.
Because it seems that in cases like that where someone isn't being charged, there's obviously still then an unsolved crime. How much can you divulge at that point without potentially jeopardizing a future prosecution?
Well, every case is fact-specific. It's really going to depend. But you wouldn't want to make, as state's attorney and a public official, you wouldn't want to make a statement that there's insufficient evidence to charge something. You could always reassure the public that the case is still under investigation and that we want to make sure that we have, the state's attorney has the burden to prove somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a very high standard, and you just want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, so to speak, before you prosecute a case. But my point is, we hear that there's insufficient evidence frequently, and I don't think there's ever been a case where we've been told there's insufficient evidence and that a case is still being investigated and the case has actually been brought forward. The other thing I wanted to mention about plea bargaining is, it is good for defendants to step up and take personal responsibility and to be held accountable by saying, I committed this offense, I'm guilty, I'm willing to accept responsibility for that. So in the context of plea bargaining, if the defendant is coming up and saying, I take responsibility, that's great. A plea bargain can also be used by the state's attorney to motivate or give some incentive to the defendant to plead guilty. But to outright dismiss a case, that's different.
John Milhiser, I want to ask you about this issue of plea bargains and about decisions when to prosecute, when not to prosecute.
Yeah, well, pleas in cases are needed. There's no way every case could be tried. There are not enough courtrooms or judges or police officers to do that. The resources aren't there. And a plea can serve a benefit to the community. We get a for sure conviction because when you go to trial, you could have the best case in the world, and there's no guarantees when you take a case to trial. And I think that highlights the importance of having a qualified, experienced prosecutor in the state's attorney's office. Additionally, there can be a benefit to the victims in a case who do not have to come and be re-victimized, don't have to come to court and testify. And we talk with the victims in cases before cases are pled out to make sure, hey, we're all on the same page. Here's what we are risking by going to trial. Here's the benefit to you, the benefit to the community for a plea in this case. So, pleas are necessary in the criminal justice system because the resources aren't there to try every case, nor would you want to try every case.
Is there a risk of being too cautious, though, and being so concerned that you might take a case to trial and lose, that you don't pursue cases, or that you let someone off perhaps a little more leniently than what they should be, just to ensure a win?
Again, that goes to the need for an experienced, qualified state's attorney, a prosecutor who's prosecuted the cases to understand what evidence is needed in a case to proceed. And there are no guarantees. So, our office tries the hard cases too. We try the cases where, it's going to be close, but we're going to do everything in our power to make sure justice is served, to make sure that the person that committed this offense or these offenses is held accountable.
Go ahead.
I was just going to reiterate that I think it's important to have the perspective that what I said with respect to pleas. It's not my view that we should accept pleas because of some sort of expediency, because we don't have enough prosecutors or we don't have enough courtrooms. People need to be held accountable for their actions, and the Constitution does provide that the government cannot deprive you of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and everybody's entitled to their day in court. And I don't think it should be the state's attorney's office to initiate some sort of plea because we don't have enough prosecutors or courtrooms. If you look at the number of felony cases that have been continued and how long they've been continued, there's no reason why we can't put them in the queue for their day in court.
Well, if a defendant agrees to a plea, though, that is their day in court,
well,
correct?
that's true if they agree. But what Milhiser is saying is that we can't try everybody because we don't have the resources. And I think that we're not going to enter into a plea because we can't try you because we don't have the prosecutors available or the courtrooms available.
Are you suggesting that people are being somehow coerced into pleas that they'd rather not do? Or
no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the perspective of entering into a plea.
I want to go back to the issue, and John Milhiser, you raised this earlier about keeping the streets safe, violent crimes, etc. So many gun crimes are prosecuted in this community, and we hear a lot about those, but what at least I don't hear very much about is the follow-up, which is, where do these guns come from? Where are these defendants finding these guns? How are all these guns getting on our streets? What role does the state's attorney play, or should the state's attorney play, in pursuing that farther up the line, to not just go after the trigger man, but to go after who gave that person the weapon? Where are these guns coming from? How can we stem the tide of these guns into our streets and into our neighborhoods?
Jim, number one, the State Attorney's Office has to aggressively prosecute those that are using guns in criminal offenses, which we will do, and we've been doing. And to kind of go up the upstream to figure out where the guns come from, there's a whole host of places. Oftentimes they're stolen from. In fact, we've had a case. In fact, the most recent case that was I tried last month. There was a gun used in that event, and that gun was stolen out of Tennessee. And so oftentimes they're stolen. We work in partnership with other law enforcement agencies. We work with the FBI and the ATF. And if there are straw purchasers out there who are buying these guns for other individuals, then that is investigated, and those cases are prosecuted. And we also work in conjunction with the U.S. Attorney's Office on a whole host of cases, not only gun cases and drug cases, but armed robbery cases. And others, and it's important to have that partnership and work with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We'll look at a gun case and see where does it make sense to try this case? Does it make sense based on the elements and based on the law to go in federal court? Does it make sense to go in state court? And we have constant communication daily and weekly with the U.S. Attorney's Office and those prosecutors, and I do with U.S. Attorney Jim Lewis, to figure out where is it best to keep our community safe to prosecute these cases.
Ron Stradt, are we doing enough to follow that trail of weapons and to try to get some of that under control in Sangamon County?
Well, I've never heard of a case prosecuted up the chain, if you will, for a stolen weapon. I'm not privy to that information about what the State's Attorney's Office is doing to aggressively pursue where people are getting these unlawful firearms, but I agree with you. I think that's something that needs to be taken care of.
John Milhiser, have those cases been prosecuted up the chain to the source of those weapons that are being used in gun crimes?
They've been investigated, and we worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the ATF in investigating if there are individuals who are committing crimes, then they're going to be prosecuted. Typically, the guns are stolen. Oftentimes, the serial numbers are scratched off. When that happens, you can't determine where that gun came from, and it's imperative that the individual that had that gun, that used that gun in a crime, is prosecuted, and we'll continue to do that.
Long we're on the issue of weapons, it's become another issue in this race for state's attorney. And Ron Stradt, you made some headlines in the last week or two in talking about your view on concealed carry cases and your feeling that Illinois' current ban on carrying a concealed weapon will ultimately be overturned, and so therefore it seems like it would be to you a waste of resources to pursue such prosecutions in most cases. Can you just go ahead and elaborate on your thoughts on that, and what is that saying about your approach to that particular law in Illinois?
Well, I think what was more shocking for a lot of people was that as a state's attorney candidate, I'm raffling off a Smith & Wesson M&P handgun to promote my concealed carry position. People should know that the state's attorney takes an oath to uphold the Constitution. The Constitution includes the Second Amendment. The United States Supreme Court in 2 cases has held that citizens have the right to keep and bear arms for the purpose of self-defense. So when it comes to prosecuting gun crimes, I don't think that it's a efficient use of resources to prosecute those gun offenses that are going to fly in the face of those 2 United States Supreme Court cases. When the defendant is convicted of that, they're going to appeal. The appellate prosecutor and the appellate defender is going to get involved in the case, and those are 2 state agencies that are funded by tax dollars. Once it goes up on appeal, I'm very confident that somebody is going to raise and the court is going to decide that, yes, our law here in Illinois is unconstitutional, since the United States Supreme Court has already decided the issue.
Is it appropriate for you to preemptively decide that before the constitutionality of Illinois' concealed carry law has been decided by the Supreme Court or by any? I mean, no one's ruled this law unconstitutional to this point.
Well, the state's attorney has enormous prosecutorial discretion. We can look at numerous cases over years, not with just Milhiser, but his predecessor and their predecessor, of all these violent felonies that have not been prosecuted. That's an exercise of prosecutorial discretion. And I have raised that there is an employee in the county building who was arrested for possession of cocaine. She's not been charged. And, so that law is on the books, and that person is not being prosecuted. And so, there's prosecutorial discretion, and the way I'm utilizing that prosecutorial discretion is to rely upon the supreme authority that's already decided this issue, the United States Supreme Court. I just don't think that it's my, as a lowly state's attorney, to go against what the United States Supreme Court has already said.
John Milhiser, your thoughts on the constitutionality of concealed carry and whether that law should in fact be enforced here?
Well, I support concealed carry. I'm a member of the NRA, a life member. I have been for years. But I also have a duty as state's attorney to enforce the law. The laws that are on the books with regard to guns in Illinois have not been ruled unconstitutional at all. They could be in the trial court, and that has not been raised. And to selectively prosecute the laws is a dangerous game to get into, and that's what my opponent wants to do. And with regard to the employee, let me touch on briefly also that the legislature makes the laws. The courts, I respect the role of the courts in determining whether or not the laws are constitutional, and I have a duty as a prosecutor with law enforcement to prosecute these laws. I know the sheriff was on this show last week. He was on this radio station, and he supports concealed carry, but also has to follow the law and takes the same position I do. And with regard to the employee, this was a courthouse employee that has contact with the state's attorney's office. When I got that report, I went to the presiding judge and I asked for a special prosecutor, and I forwarded that case to the appellate prosecutor's office. And what happened with this case is that's not up to me. When there's a conflict in the office, and this happens routinely, I forward it to the appellate prosecutor's office, and they decide whether or not charges are filed, and they decide whether or not, what happens with the case. That decision is not made by me.
We're almost out of time, and I want to touch on one other issue real briefly, and it ties into prosecutorial discretion, what cases you pursue and what cases you don't. We are here in the state capital of Springfield, the capital of a state that has a vast reputation for political corruption. John Milhiser, as state's attorney, what is your role in addressing that, and should the office be more aggressive, can it be more aggressive in trying to go after governmental prosecution that may be happening under the Capitol Dome here in Springfield?
Well, again, any crime that is committed in Sangamon County will be investigated and prosecuted if needed by the Sangamon County State's Attorney's Office or another prosecutorial agency. We work with the U.S. Attorney's Office, as I mentioned, on a routine basis. They have a public corruption unit where they have attorneys, FBI agents specifically assigned to ferret out public corruption and prosecute those cases, and to somehow target individuals when there is. Well, strike that. Let me say that if If there's evidence of a crime, that will be investigated, no matter who does it, whether it be at the state capitol, with a police officer, with somebody that works in the sheriff's department, with anybody else. That case will be investigated and will be prosecuted if necessary.
Ron Stradt, these cases are often pursued by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Many of these cases have been. Would it be duplicative or unnecessary for the state's attorney to also jump into that when there are other agencies also doing that same work?
No. The history has been that the U.S. Attorney has gotten involved in these cases because the state's attorney hasn't done anything. My view is, and what I have said is, I want to impanel a grand jury to investigate and prosecute legislative misconduct. A perfect case, as an example, is there's a state legislator who was recently expelled from the House for allegedly taking a $7,000 bribe. We are here in Sangamon County. We have the state capitol right here in our backyard, and I think that people ought to know that the state's attorney is going to aggressively prosecute legislative misconduct. You hear a million times that throw all these bums out, they're all corrupt. Well, I'm willing to stand up to that and say I'm going to investigate it and I'm going to prosecute it if need be. Another thing that I have said is, how can you expect these candidates who take hundreds of thousands of dollars from legislative leaders to be an independent thinker when they get elected? To me, I don't know if they are going to be an independent thinker or not, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to look at the campaign contributions that these individuals have received. I'm going to look at their voting patterns, and I'm going to investigate whether or not there's any legislative misconduct. I think people right here in Sangamon County, with the state government being right here in our backyard, we need to be aggressive, and we need to take the lead in looking at some of the corruption, if any, at the Capitol.
We are just about out of time. I'd just like to have you each just make a quick wrap-up statement, and whatever you want to cover in there, feel free to. John Milhiser, go ahead.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jim. And again, thanks for giving me the opportunity to come on. I'm honored to be Sangamon County State's Attorney. And the voters understand the importance of the office for the safety of our community and the importance of having an experienced, qualified prosecutor as the State's Attorney to make sure that those that do harm in our community, that person has the ability to go to court and convict those individuals. And I want to continue in this important role.
Ron Stradt, your final message to listeners this morning.
Well, I'm a former prosecutor, a former assistant attorney general under Jim Ryan. I am a Marine Corps veteran, and I think that in order to fight violent crime, we need to elect a Marine Corps veteran as myself. And as I look out into the lobby, I see Brad Shivey with some sort of hatchet. So
he's coming up next.
I think I might have him as the enforcer for the state's attorney's office.
Some voters are a little angrier than others. I guess,
that would absolutely deter crime to see Brad Shivey coming at you with a hatchet.
State's Attorney John Milhiser, challenger Ron Stradt, thank you both for a lively discussion this morning. We very much appreciate it.